those detained. Johannesburg Public Safety MMC Mgcini Ntshaku says working together allows law enforcement agencies to tackle crime more effectively. He's promised more operations across the city to make communities safer.
And South Africa's Defence Department says it has noted with concern comments made by the Chief of the South African Navy, Vice Admiral Monde Lobese, during the SA Navy Gala dinner held at the weekend. The department says in his speech, Vice Admiral Lobese made an unfortunate statement that caused aspersions at the leadership of government. Defence Head of Communications Simpiwe Dlamini says the minister regards the remarks as inappropriate.
The minister regards his remarks not only as inappropriate, disingenuous and unfortunate on a matter that he is fully aware that is receiving attention at all levels, starting from within the department to Parliament. The minister will be taking appropriate steps to deal with this unfortunate outburst were still from a senior person at his level. The views expressed at the event do not reflect the official position of the department.
And United Kingdom's Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood has defended the sweeping changes to the UK's asylum system, telling MPs the current situation is out of control and unfair. Speaking in the House of Commons, Mahmood said if they fail to deal with the crisis of refugees, they will draw more people down a path that starts with anger and ends in hatred. Under the plans, refugee status will become temporary. Guaranteed housing support for asylum seekers will end, and new capped, safe and legal routes into the UK will be created. Some Labour MPs expressed concern, with Nadia Whittom calling the plans shameful, but the Conservatives gave the measures a caution welcome. A recap of your top story. An empty chair for Donald Trump at the G20 summit offers an opportunity for South Africa's host, determined to set an agenda for global leaders in the face of the U.S. president's hostility to multilateral diplomacy. The U.S. has decided not to attend the inaugural G20 summit in Africa, citing claims that South Africa mistreats white individuals, reflecting its apartheid past. For any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I am Matapela Mahape.
SABC News. The African Perspective. Business, trade, and investment opportunities that put the continent.
In our sports headlines, DR Congo President Felix Antoine Chilombo has pledged national team players, and Live Golf receives significant investment primarily from the Saudi Public Investment Fund. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Business, trade, and investment opportunities that put the continent first. Africa in Business with Tami Ngubeni.
It is a very good afternoon to you, Ghana. Good afternoon, Mozambique, Senegal, Côte d'Ivoire. Good afternoon to you, Eritrea. Good afternoon, Nigeria. Good afternoon, Africa. Welcome to Africa in Business on Channel Africa. I'm Tami Ngubeni. This afternoon on our agenda, we'll look at the financing of a Kapower ship by the Mauritius Commercial Bank. We do know that Kapower ship is the world's biggest provider of floating plants. They already provide power to several countries on the African continent. We'll look at the details of this $400 million loan. Also coming up this afternoon, the ZIG has backed and increased its reserves by 9% to now 980 million US dollars, getting very close to that 1 billion rand or $1 billion target rather that they'd set for themselves before the end of the year. Do engage with us on our various social media platforms on X, Instagram and YouTube. You'll find us at Channel Africa 1, and on Facebook we are at Channel Africa. Welcome to it.
Connecting Africa to the world. Africa in Business with Tami Ngubeni. brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy.
It is exactly 8 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time as we turn our sights to Zimbabwe, where the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe has stated that reserves backing the Zimbabwe dollar currency have increased by nearly 9% to $980 million. The RBZ, which is the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe's Director of Economic Research, Modeling and Policy, Nepson Mupunga, says the central bank is well on its way to meeting some of the conditions necessary for a monocurrency regime, as dictated in Statutory Instrument 218 of 2023. Mupunga says the Reserve Bank hopes to hit the $1 billion mark in terms of reserves by the end of this year. For more on this, we joined on the line by Persistence Ngwanyanya, Monetary Policy Committee member of the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe and founder and CEO of Billion Group. A very good afternoon to you, so good to have you with us. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So what is your take on the reserves backing the Zimbabwe gold? Was this quite expected, or is this pretty much a bit of a surprise even for the Reserve Bank?
Given the background, the journey we have traveled with currencies, the domestic currencies, it's necessary that our currency be backed, and current backing of our currency in the form of foreign currency reserves, including reserves of precious minerals, has given us some measure of, or has given the currency some measure of convertibility and therefore confidence in the currency. But we have always wanted to see the increase in reserves beyond what is required in a multiple currency regime, in readiness of the monocurrency regime. The reserves at the current level of $980 million provide more than 4 times cover on the reserve money, our local currency reserve money, our ZiG reserve money. And ideally, the acceptable level of cover is a full cover of the reserve money. But we have managed to exceed that 3 times, at more than 4 times, more than 3 times. But beyond that, we have always wanted to build reserves to cover the import cover, or to provide for the import cover of 3 to 6 months needed for a country in a monocurrency regime. We are not yet in a monocurrency regime, but we want those reserves to continue increase to the levels that are needed for a currency in a monocurrency
and
regime.
I'd like us, Mr. Ngwanyama, to talk about this first and foremost. You're speaking about a monocurrency regime. The deadline that has been set by government is that of 2030. What is it going to take in order for Zimbabwe to just have the ZiG as its currency? What needs to be in place to take effect?
So we need the conditions for the monocurrency to be satisfied, and one of the conditions is that of the reserves we are talking about. We need to 6 times cover. So at 1 billion, reserves currently provide for 1 and 1.2 times cover. And for 6 months cover, that is the maximum we need. We need reserves of between 5 and 6 billion US dollars. But at the pace we are moving, I am quite confident we are able to get to those levels. So it's one of the conditions. But the most important condition, which all these other conditions are coming to support, is stability. We need stability, macroeconomic stability, price and exchange rate stability. If we get to a point of durable stability, meaning beyond 1 year, you need stability to be able to engender some level of trust in the currency. So it is the stability which is necessary to restore trust in the currency. It is stability which will deal with all other issues that the market is concerned about, the mono currency.
I'd like us to look at the increase of the reserves. What could that be attributed to? Does the increase in the gold price have anything to do with that? And what are the risks associated to this?
Yes, it is attributed to a number of factors. But most importantly for me is the conscious decision by the government to start building reserves from obviously the gold and other precious minerals, but also from foreign currency. I think our reserves, the last I checked, in terms of gold, it exceeded or around 3.5 tons of gold. But obviously that aspect of reserves is affected by the performance of the gold prices, which are currently on the rally. And yes, we also benefited from the increase in the gold prices. But we have also continued to see increase in the cash or in the foreign currency and also other precious minerals that are making up the reserves. And with the rate at which we are accumulating these reserves, it's quite encouraging. Our exports are increasing, and this is the source of the money that we use to accumulate the reserves, because we have got a surrender system where the exporters would have to surrender a certain level of export proceeds for us to they surrender that we buy that at using our local currency, and we use part of the money to accumulate the reserves. And the rate at which we have been accumulating the reserves is so far encouraging. But beyond the reserves, we need the confidence in the currency. But you cannot detach confidence from the broader performance of the economy. Our economy has been performing to expectations, and in some cases actually exceeding expectations, given the increased incidences of external factors.
Mr. Persistence Ngwanyana, unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it at that for this afternoon. But thank you so much for this update regarding the increase in the reserves for the ZiG. Certainly Zimbabwe looking on the up and up. And then Mr. Ngwanyama, Mr. Persistence Ngwanyama, Monetary Policy Committee member of the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe and founder and CEO of Billion Group. Thank you, sir.
A atenção do mundo está em Joanesburgo. Líderes das maiores economias do planeta reúnem-se para tomar decisões que irão moldar o futuro das nações e dos mercados. O Channel África está no centro dos acontecimentos a trazer-lhe as conversas, análises e perspectivas que realmente importam. A cimeira do G20 nos dias 22 e 23 de novembro, sob uma perspectiva africana em tempo real. Acompanhe tudo no Channel África.
It is 17 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. So no company or industry is immune as market sell-off continues. U.S. futures are in the red. That's an indication that Wall Street will open in negative territory. Now, analysts say there are multiple drivers of markets right now, including fears about Altech stock valuations, concerns about a weakening U.S. economic outlook that could be exacerbated by the prolonged shutdown of the U.S. Congress. To speak to us further about this, we're joined on the line by wealth specialist at Rand Swiss, Viv Govender. Good to be talking to you once again, Mr. Governor. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So how much of the current sell-off is driven by fears of a weakening U.S. economic outlook? And I ask this in comparison or versus concerns that the Federal Reserve may delay interest rate cuts.
Yeah, look, I mean, we're getting the first bit of data on that on Thursday, where we have U.S. Non-farm payrolls, which were delayed because of the shutdown, the government shutdown. I mean, people weren't being paid, they didn't go to work, and they didn't obviously collect the data that needed to be collected. I think that that's partly it. So there is that question about global, weakness. But I think also what's been happening in the past little while is we're seeing fears about AI, artificial intelligence. People may not realize the kind of bet the world has taken on artificial intelligence over the last couple of years. It's actually bigger than the bet people took on, subprime mortgages back in the day that caused the financial crisis in 2008, if you remember that. It's almost 20 years ago, but it was what caused the great financial, the global financial recession. You know what I mean? And that is, I think, looking at the current situation, the amounts of money being spent here are actually larger. And I think that's one of the fears out there is that if you look at the US, half of US GDP growth this year is pretty much attributable to AI. You look at the stock market, over 80% of the US stock market improvement this year has been due to AI-related stocks. And so that could be something that maybe people are thinking that they could be a bit overdone at the moment. And we also see news that people like Peter Thiel, for those that don't know Peter Thiel, if you watch the movie The Social Network, he was one of the guys that invested in Facebook. He's a big time investor. He's actually South African, or has a link to South Africa. And he basically sold his stake in Nvidia, as well as his stake, or reduced his stake in Tesla, as well as another famous investor, Masayoshi-son from Japan, who basically runs a company, a fund called SoftBank. And SoftBank sold out the Nvidia shares as well. So that makes people think maybe the smart money thinks this is overdone.
Mm. So are AI tech store valuations fundamentally justified? Or to your point, is the market pricing in unrealistic growth expectations that perhaps could also be prolonging the sell-off?
Look, I mean, I did an analysis on this just the last couple of weeks, and the numbers are shocking. I mean, to give an idea how much money the U.S. companies are spending on AI, it's like $400 billion in the next year is planned to be spent on AI infrastructure. $400 billion. To justify this kind of spend, like a company like Microsoft doesn't take the full value of what it creates. It takes about maybe 5% of the value of what it creates. If it's spending $100 billion, that $100 billion has to create more than $2 trillion of GDP, probably like $3 trillion of GDP for that $100 billion of investment. $3 trillion is roughly the size of the French economy, the whole of France's economy. And Microsoft is just one company. Meta is doing similar. Google is doing similar. Alphabet, Amazon, etc. And all these guys up to it's $4 trillion. For that to be value, you're looking about maybe something in the region of about say 3 to 4 France's worth of growth. And then has to be created to justify this kind of investment here, and that's a lot of money. I mean, France is one of the largest economies in the world, and we're talking multiple Frances. We're talking something like half the size of the U.S. economy. In terms of GDP, has to be created by the investments these companies are taking in this year alone.
So what does the simultaneous decline in traditional safe havens like gold signal about overall investor sentiment and liquidity conditions? Because it's a completely different trading market, a completely different investing market. AI, as you've mentioned, having skyrocketed and taking the lead.
Yeah, look, I mean, if you look back at the global financial crisis back in 2008, again, I'm using that as a reference point because that'll be the last thing that people remember. When that occurred, gold was not a safe haven. U.S. bonds were not a safe haven. There was no safe haven. Everything fell. In fact, one of the places that didn't fall, strangely enough, was South Africa, as much as at least the rest of the world, especially our banks stayed really strong during that period compared to the rest of the banks of the world. But if we do have a pullback like this, it will not be a case of safe haven in gold or a safe haven in Bitcoin or a safe haven in many things, because historically we don't really see that occurring. We do, we look back and look at the gold price. When things really, really go bad, you don't really find gold, being as stable as people would like it to be when people are nervous about everything.
Could gold once again reestablish itself as that potential traditional safe haven? After all is said and done, it's almost like let the new kids on the block come and do what they will, but the old faithfuls will remain.
It could. I mean, there's arguments to be made that that the being of the gold standard in the 1970s, which was about 50 years ago, is basically always going to lead to the situation in which fiat currencies, which is currencies not backed by anything, are going to inflate themselves, to valuelessness or to high levels of inflation. But as yet, we have not really seen that occur. Though, if you look at it, we are seeing Europe, the US, Japan, most of the developed world basically is entering a period where the demographic situation is going to result in huge pressures on those economies. I mean, I saw a stat recently that is amazing. Since 1990, basically incomes have stayed. This is talking like people that earn incomes like salaries and so on in Spain has stayed pretty much flat, but pensions have increased by like 90%. They almost doubled in that period of time. Where people, who are actually working have not gotten an increase, and most of Europe, the rest of the developed world are in that situation in which they have these huge pension deficits that are going to be, having to be sorted out. And in that scenario, usually what happens, money printing occurs, and that usually leads to devaluation. So we do find, if that does occur, that people are going to go to safe havens, be it gold, Bitcoin, or whatever they may think is something that's going to maintain value to that period of time.
Viv Govender, thank you so much. Great insight there. Viv Govender, wealth specialist at Rand Swiss.
Connecting Africa to the world. Africa in Business with Tamin Gubeni brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy.
It is exactly 4:25 Central African time as we turn our attention to power, energy provision. We're looking at the Mauritius Commercial Bank, the MCB. They've led the facility for Copowership, which is the world's biggest provider of floating power plants. A Turkish company which powers countries including Côte d'Ivoire, Ghana, Mozambique, as well as Senegal, has now secured a new $400 million loan. The new loan is said to represent an expansion of Mauritius Commercial Bank's bid to win business across Africa, and as it taps into surging demand for energy on the continent. For more on this, we joined on the line by Nahinal Modi, Executive Vice President for Power and Infrastructure Financing at Mauritius Commercial Bank. Good to have you with us. Welcome.
Hi, good afternoon. Nice to have. Thanks for having me here.
Thank you. Could you tell us more about this transaction as well as the role that was played by the Mauritius Commercial Bank in securing the loan?
Sure. That was a $400 million syndicated facility for Car Power's affiliate, which is a SeaWorld Energy Holding. It's the role of MCB acted as a sole mandated lead arranger on that transaction. So we had the borrower in structuring the transactions and coming up with the terms and conditions for that facility. And then we did a syndication where we approached lenders in the market. The syndication was very well received by the market. We had, given the level of interest received from different lenders. So the facility was closed with 3 different lenders, and with MCB included, that's a pool of 4 lenders. What's unique about the transaction is, given the size, it's actually the first major loan transactions for the borrower, SeaWorld Energy Holding. It's a newly created entity for the Car Powers Group, and it's the entity is going to be responsible for their African operations. And the financing was tied up to a pool of power purchase agreements with different West African national off-takers in countries like Senegal and Côte d'Ivoire. And the proceeds of the facility is to help SeaWorld Energy towards, they are financing their African operations as well as their capital expenditure for new power ships.
You mentioned that this is a syndicated loan, that there are 3-4 other lenders. And who are those?
Yeah, the other lenders are Afrasia from Mauritius, EcoBank, and Federated Hermes.
And how does this deal specifically position the Mauritius Commercial Bank standing in Africa's energy and infrastructure sectors?
No, definitely. The power and infrastructure desk at MCB was only started 4 or 5 years ago. So over the years, we have recorded steady growth in our loan portfolio. We've started to support blue chip clients, which are operating either on a regional or international players. And we've been assisting them on all their financing needs. And these transactions, given the strong level of interest that we received from the market in general, not just restricted to those three lenders, but we also had other lenders who were very keen to participate. The level of interest that we got on these transactions and the fact that we were able to explain the credit story, the business of Car Power, is a testimony to the capabilities of MCBs to structure innovative and highly bespoke financing solutions for our clients. One thing that I've noted, given my time doing power and infrastructure financing in Africa over the past 5 years, there's no cookie cutter financing solutions. Each borrower, each company has its own intricacies. And it's really important as a borrower to have a very good understanding of a client's business model, understanding the terrain of the countries, the places where they operate, and be able to offer financing that's adaptable for their business model and all the challenges that you face.
And that's a really valid point that you make, that there is no cookie cutter formula, that you really have to look at each case scenario specifically. But looking at this one here, how will this funding directly contribute to the local economy's development and electrical goals of African nations where you operate specifically?
Sure. I mean, if you look at the borrower in that particular situation, in that particular transactions, I mean, the business model of Car Power is to provide emergency power relief to countries that are facing power shortages. And you may be aware that in Africa, you have 600 million people without electricity. And one of the reasons for loss of productivity is in many countries, there's no steady supply of power 24 hours a day. So many businesses have to shut down, have to switch to diesel, or simply have to stop productions while waiting for power to come back online. So the business of Car Power here is to really alleviate power shortages, power issues that are facing different African nations. And by providing immediate relief to those countries, it helps the countries to remain electrified, as well as helping the business communities and local industries to continue operating without disruptions or to minimize the impact of disruptions.
Right. Well, thank you so much for that roundup, Mr. Nagimal Modi, Executive Vice President for Power and Infrastructure Financing at Mauritius Commercial Bank, following the $400 million loan to Kapowership, that done in association with 3 other lenders. We thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. He takes us to exactly 4:32 Central African time as we head over now to the markets desk, where Tabiso Lehoko is standing by with your latest market indicators.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thanks, Tami, and good afternoon. The dollar in South Africa will cost you 17 Rand 10, Botswana 13 Pula 94, Namibia 17 Namibian dollars 10, And in Zambia, it's at 22 kwacha 58 to the dollar. In Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 459. Ethiopia, 155 birr 159. Uganda, a 3,000 shilling 552. And in Tanzania, it is trading at 2,000 shilling 426. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,443,000 naira. In Egypt, the dollar is trading at 47 Egyptian pound 3. Tunisia, 2 dinar 93. In Algeria, it's at 129 dinar 425, and the Moroccan dirham is trading at 9,144 to the US dollar. In Angola, the dollar is trading at 912 kwanza, while the Congolese franc is at 2,174 to the US dollar. Commodities markets now: gold is trading at $4,066, platinum $1,543 per ounce, Brent crude oil is at $64.31 a barrel. For any business stories you would like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business in Johannesburg, I'm Tebisolo Huku.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
And for the latest from the business of sport, a very good afternoon to you, Figile Lengwate.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Good afternoon, Tambi. Let's start off with football news. The Democratic Republic of Congo will reward each member of the national team a $1 million bonus for their victory over Nigeria and qualify for the FIFA World Cup in the Americas. The Leopards of DR Congo kept the hopes of World Cup place alive as they edged Nigeria 4-3 on penalties after a 1-0 draw at the end of extra time to win the African qualifying playoffs in Morocco. Acting on the directive of President Felix Tshisekedi, the Congolese government approved the special financial incentive that spurred the team to victory. The winner will now represent Africa in the Interconfederations playoffs in March 2026, where the final global qualification sport will be decided. Kenya Taekwondo Federation, KTF President Major Suleiman Sumba says the upcoming World Under-21 Taekwondo Championship will assist the sport to be a more sustainable business. The championship will be held from the 3rd to the 6th of December 2025 at the Kasarani Gymnasium in Nairobi. Sumba says sport is not just about entertainment, competition or fitness. It is a business that creates employment for different stakeholders such as professional athletes, coaches and administrators. President Major Suleiman Sumba explains.
The realistic as a business is slowly coming up. As you know, football started long time ago and it has got a bigger fan base. As for Taekwondo, we engage in a lot of training. The coaches can easily get employment. Those that are practicing Taekwondo, you can bring in on board sponsorship, branding with bigger companies, just like other sporting activities.
The highly experienced Taekwondo administrator, Sumba, elaborates on the benefits of sport as a business.
Currently, we have a former player like Cisse and Ruth from Cote d'Ivoire, who are earning a lot of money because of their prowess and their achievement in the international worlds and Olympic. They are a brand name and they are earning a lot of money. So this can give way to other aspiring and coming up athletes to emulate and know that we can expand this space and be an industry. We will be there, and the movement has started.
The final DP World Tour event of the season, the DP World Tour Championship, had a suitably thrilling conclusion at Jumeirah Golf Estate. While it wasn't all bad news for Rory McIlroy, who sealed his 7th race to Dubai, it is Miss Fitzpatrick who took the most satisfaction from the tournament, as well as the most prize money. In total, $10 million was on the table at the event, and Fitzpatrick walks away with $3 million of it. As for McElroy, he settled for less than half that sum, $1.27 million. That's not all the players take away from the week, thanks to their placings in the race to Dubai rankings. McElroy and Fitzpatrick also scoop a healthy chunk of the $6 million bonus money set aside for the season-long contest. Some more golf news as we wrap up. The South African Live Golf event has already seen high demand, with 24,000 three-day passes sold in just 4 days, which broke Live Golf's record for ticket sales in that time frame. Live Golf is estimated to generate an economic impact of $41 million to $47 million in South Africa through event spending, taxes, and visitors' travel and spend. Additionally, the event will feature a substantial prize purse of $25 million, which is higher than the Sunshine Tour's entire 2024-2025 season purse. A tournament at Steyn City will have a prize fund of $25 million, exceeding the total of Sunshine Tour. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fikile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
It is exactly 4:39 Central African time as South Africa prepares to host the G20 Leaders Summit this weekend. The global community has been called upon to confront the persistent and emerging barriers to gender equality with renewed urgency and innovation. The call was made at a high-level gathering celebrating women leadership, innovation and inclusive growth in Johannesburg last night. Leaders from some of the world's biggest advanced and emerging economies, the G20 group of nations, are expected to descend to Johannesburg for their annual summit. Ndlandla Mahlangu reports.
A Pan-African woman-led advisory and execution firm, Amila Africa, last night hosted the Women in Trade and Investment Networking event in Johannesburg, South Africa, spotlighting African women shaping global trade, investment, innovation and cultural excellence. Taking place ahead of the G20 summit, the event brought together women leaders who are shaping the future of global trade and investment, including policymakers, investors, entrepreneurs and creatives. Litabo Sithole, Managing Director at Amila Africa, says the event highlighted women's leadership as central to global economic transformation. She says the upcoming G20 summit also offers a rare chance for South Africa to put women's interests and those of the African continent and the global south at large at the center of the international agenda, while promoting the country as a major investment destination.
You know, I think it's a monumental occasion for Africa to host its first G20 ever. And I think what you have seen is a lot of women being either the chairs or the co-chairs of working groups and task forces, and really leading them with great courage, with grit, with excellence. And I think if there was ever a doubt that women can lead global platforms, that has been debunked. And the opportunities I see are for women to platform themselves, to access new markets, to collaborate with women from across the world. I mean, we are hosting the world, quite literally. We're hosting the 20 most powerful economies in the world. And so as a South African woman, I don't think you'll ever get another opportunity to host the world at home and host the world and see what the world has for you and take it.
Dr. Cindy Swamzamo, Global President at Circle of Global Business Women, was the keynote speaker. She says the upcoming G20 summit offers immense opportunities for women.
The opportunities for the upcoming G20 initiatives, I can say they're galore. Remember, we are talking to the G20 countries, which is member states of about 20 member states, including Africa. Because if you look at Africa, and the reason why I'm actually passionate about this, if you look at Africa, we've got 70% of the population. It's young people in the continent, and they're no longer the future, they are the leadership. And they must start leading right now. So they're the real women of tomorrow.
The G20 Leaders Summit, scheduled for Saturday the 22nd and Sunday the 23rd of November, will mark the culmination of South Africa's G20 presidency. It will be hosted for the first time on African soil under this year's theme of solidarity, equality and sustainability. Thousands of international delegates, media representatives and visitors are expected to gather at the Nasrec Expo Center in Johannesburg for the two-day summit. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Nhlanhla Mahlangu in Johannesburg.
It is exactly 4:42 Central African Time. Now, the Secretary-General of the African Continental Free Trade Area, Joelle Muteba, says Africa must mobilize its own domestic capital if it hopes to effectively address the rising cost of borrowing and drive investment on the continent. Speaking at the Bloomberg Africa Business Summit, taking place in Johannesburg as an official sideline event of B20 South Africa 2025, Muteba joined global leaders gathered to confront the key issues shaping Africa's future and influencing the global economy. Channel Africa's economics reporter, Innocent Samosa.
The summit convened influential leaders from business, government and finance, including regulators, policymakers and market participants, to explore Africa's evolving role in the global economy. Brenda Tsai, Bloomberg's chief marketing officer, spoke to us about the vision and purpose behind the summit.
We're here today because there's tremendous opportunity in Africa, and South Africa in particular holds a lot of that opportunity. On the back of the G20 and the B20, we are hosting our first ever Africa Business Summit. This is our inaugural summit, and it is an official side event of the G20.
After Secretary-General Joelle Muteba says Africa must mobilize domestic capital to curb rising borrowing costs and boost investment across the continent.
Mobilizing our own domestic capital to invest in Africa, whether we are investing in infrastructure, in SMEs as an asset class for investment, for us to overcome this issue of the cost of debt.
Kasi Insight CEO Yannick Lefang says a functional digital payment system for SMEs could be a game changer.
Well, as you know, Africa is one of the biggest continents in the world. 54 countries, about 1.4 billion people today. It is estimated that the opening of that market with the ACF2, Africa Free Trade Continent, will turn it into a $3.3 trillion market over the next couple of years. And so part of that market involves payments and transactions. And so seamless payment on the continent will open up a significant opportunity for businesses to be able to trade, for African consumers to be able to buy and purchase products that are locally made on the continent. And it's so important because we live today in a geopolitical environment whereby the global trade is changing, the geopolitics is changing. I think Africa would have to rely a lot on itself.
I asked businessman Russell Luck what reforms or declarations he hopes to see at this year's G20. Here's what he had to say.
In terms of expectations of G20, it's tough to say. I think if you want change, it's got to start at home and it's got to start with you. I hope something productive comes out of it. It's disappointing that not certain key role players aren't at G20, but we've got to look forward and build positively. Africa is wonderful, loads of opportunity, loads of talented people, and we must just keep moving forward and the future will get better, but that's the way to challenge these things.
For Channel Africa News, I'm Innocent Samosa in Johannesburg.
Got something to say? Are you passionate about issues that matter? Do you have a voice that deserves to be heard? Well, we've got the perfect platform for you. Call in or drop us a WhatsApp on +27 63 406 9126 and we will call you back so you could have your say and be part of the conversation.
30 years of age. I just turned 30 on the 15th of November. So that's who I am, you know.
It's not just talk, it's your chance to air your views, share your opinion, engage with a community that values your perspective. Follow us on our social media. Visit our website at www.channelafrica.co.za and get ready to share your views on Channel Africa, the African perspective. From markets to innovation. From markets to innovation. Africa in Business with Tami Ngubeni covers it all. With Africa's future in focus, Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It is all about the upcoming G20 summit. South Africa's International Relations Minister Ronald Lamola has downplayed the United States' absence from this weekend's G20 Leaders Summit taking place in Johannesburg, saying the country simply views it as non-attendance. Speaking at the Nasrec Expo Center in Johannesburg on Monday, Lamola said the U.S. has made it clear that it will not participate, but stressed that the summit will proceed with the nations that are present. He added that Sherpas are continuing negotiations on the Leaders' Declaration, and South Africa is working to secure consensus among attending countries as preparations for the landmark gathering reach their final stages. Channel Africa's reporter Michael Mbewe.
It is all systems go for the G20 Leaders Summit, with or without the United States. That was the clear message from South Africa's Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Ronald Lamola, as the country enters its final preparations to host the landmark gathering in Johannesburg. Lamola made it plain that while the US has opted not to attend, the show will go on, or the work of the G20 will continue with the nations present. He emphasized that negotiations on the Leaders' Declaration are progressing and that South Africa remains focused on steering the summit toward meaningful outcomes. In his words, the absence of one country does not halt global cooperation, and South Africa is ready to welcome the world. Addressing the media, South Africa's Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Ronald Lamola, said the U.S. has decided to stay away.
How do we view the U.S. non-attendance? They have said it themselves, that they are not coming. That's what they've said. They are not attending. You can call it whatever. Someone can call it a boycott, someone will call it non-attendance, but the reality is that they are not attending, they are not here. We view it as non-attendance. They are absent. So in their absence, the countries that are present must take a decision. And that is what is currently unfolding. The Sherpas are negotiating the Leaders' Declaration. We are moving towards making a decision in terms of in terms of the Leaders' Declaration. Negotiations are happening. And in the later stage, in the course of the week later, you will hear what is the outcome. But we are forging ahead to persuade the countries that are present that we must adopt a Leaders' Declaration.
Besides the US and Argentina, China, Canada, and Mexico will be represented by senior government officials rather than their heads of state. Lamola said this should not be interpreted as Africa being sidelined or disrespected.
We don't see this as a snub or undermining of Africa. In all multilateral platforms events, it does happen for whatever reasons that heads of states are not able to attend, and they will delegate whoever they decide to delegate, either their foreign minister or whoever that the head of state decides to delegate for whatever reasons and whatever architecture of that country. It's nothing abnormal. Even ourselves sometimes, I represent President Ramaphosa in many platforms. And the recent one, high-level event, I represented the president, was at the Financing for Development in Sevilla in Spain. You'll remember when the president had challenges at that time in the GNU and so forth. I represented him in Spain, and I've represented him in many platforms.
South Africa's Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana echoed Lamola's remarks, noting that such geopolitical tensions have been a recurring feature of past G20 summits.
You know, it's not the first time that you've got geopolitical problems in the G20. The first acute problem, which was bigger than the one we're facing now, was in Indonesia. In Indonesia, it was the first year of Ukraine war, and the tensions were more acute at the time, particularly between the G7 and the developing world. So it was not only one country, it was the G7 and the developing world. I would imagine first opening sentence of all the countries of the G20, or G7, I'm sorry, we must condemn Russia for attacking Ukraine, and we couldn't find each other on a declaration. We've managed, the G20 did not collapse. We carried through that geopolitical problem into India. The G20 did not collapse.
Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi detailed the steps the province has taken to ensure it is fully prepared to host the multilateral gathering, including infrastructure improvements and financial readiness.
From our side as a province, what we've done for the preparations, especially
infrastructure, water, electricity, and the beautification of the entire province, we requested departments to use their current budgets. So there was no new money that was allocated specifically for the G20. What we've done in the last 4 months, we've been meeting every Tuesday. Myself as the Premier with the MECs, the Executive Mayors and national leadership, that's the ministers that are responsible for this task. And we went item by item that has been budgeted for and allocated to municipalities and provincial government. And we've worked extremely hard to ensure that we fix the street lights, the traffic lights, fill the potholes and attend to issues that need to be attended.
Michael Mbewe, Channel Africa News, Johannesburg.
It is exactly 4:53 Central African Time. Bonjour, Joelle.
Bonjour, Tammy.
What's on your agenda aujourd'hui?
Oui, sur Vue d'Afrique aujourd'hui, il sera question du Gabon où plusieurs anciens hauts responsables et collaborateurs de la présidence écopent de peine de prison ferme assortie de sursis dans le cadre du procès de la première dame du Gabon. Nous parlerons aussi des crimes organisés qui sont en nette hausse en Afrique depuis 2019 et ce dû à l'instabilité politique entre autres. Et aussi en sport avec Jolino Sungu, il sera question aujourd'hui des finalistes de la CAF Awards 2025 mais aussi des pays organisateurs de la CAN 2027. Merci de rester connecté. Merci Tammy.
Merci beaucoup. That's Joelle coming up with Vue d'Afrique at the top of the hour. But for now, we continue our focus on the G20 and we were speaking and just hearing a bite now from South Africa's summit, South Africa's International Relations Minister Ronald Lamola saying, yes, it will be business as usual despite the United States not attending and saying that the likes of China, Russia, Mexico who are going to be sending representatives and not necessarily the heads of state should not be interpreted as a snub on the African continent. Channel Africa will be on the ground on the 22nd and the 23rd of November, bringing you live coverage coming from the G20 in Johannesburg.
Africa in Business. Africa in Business delivers key insights and real-time updates on Africa's growing markets with Tamen Gubeni. The African Perspective on Channel Africa.
Channel Africa.
We close off this afternoon with a look at gambling in South Africa. The South African Responsible Gambling Foundation has expressed concern about the growing number of young people, particularly who are addicted to gambling. The foundation is among many role players attending the Gaming Regulators Africa Forum's 16th annual conference that's taking place in Sun City outside Rustenburg in the northwest province of South Africa. Zebulon Main reports.
The rapid growth of illegal online gambling is among many issues that will be discussed during this conference. Buitumelo Kalinge is the acting CEO of the Northwest Gambling Board.
Among a lot of topics that will be discussed in this GRAF conference, it's illegal gambling and responsible gambling, which comes to the forefront. We must remember that we have here policymakers, we have here member states who are making laws in different states. So we are going to be discussing those issues of illegal gambling. How can we tackle illegal gambling as gambling regulators?
A big concern for the South African Responsible Gambling Foundation is the many young people that have gambling problems. A big concern for the South African Responsible Gambling Foundation is the many young people that have gambling problems. Sibongile Smilane Kuntana is a director of the foundation.
The trend that we're noticing is that it's affecting mostly the youth, people who are of the legal age to gamble between the ages 18 and 35. They are the mostly affected, and also those that are unemployed who actually depend on the social relief discretionary grant, and also your students, your SASA. And I think from our point of view, when we say that it mostly affects them, because we are saying that those monies are actually monies that they should be spent on themselves, on their households.
Similane Kuntana adds that some who are addicted to gambling are coming forward to get assistance.
We've got psychoeducation therapy where you actually see a psychologist, a clinical social worker, or a clinical psychologist. You provide 8 sessions per individual, but if an individual is so much affected, the treatment professionals can actually motivate for more sessions. We then have a national responsible gambling where once you've finished your sessions, you can then, attend those groups sessions, which we do on a weekly basis every weekend on a Saturday. We also have inpatient. We then rehabilitate people in a hospital.
I'm Zebulon Maine in Rustenburg, Northwest.
And that's how we come to the end of Africa in Business for today, as we continue focusing on the upcoming G20 summit. A quick wrap. We did look at the G20 Leaders Summit that's coming up this weekend, and the gathering that took place with women gathered together ahead of the G20, and it was a high-level gathering celebrating women leadership, innovation and inclusive growth. Also taking a look at this afternoon at the latest coming out of the United States and the volatility there in their markets. Good news for Zimbabwe, as the ZiG reserves backing increases by nearly 9% to $980 million, putting the country well on track to its goals of having a monocurrency. They hope to achieve this by the year 2030. By all indications, it looks like it's all systems go from then. But then obviously the very big question here is how much of this was reliant and is reliant on gold and the price of gold, which is in and of itself volatile. Well, that's how we leave it for today. Thank you to our incredible team behind the scenes from Africa in Business on Channel Africa. Until tomorrow, you have yourself a splendid evening further.
Business, trade, and investment